So Shashank, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Just diving right into AI and everything AI. So we've seen across domains and sectors that AI has been integrated to different scales. You're even talking about AI agents today. But when it comes to finance sector, I think one has always been wary about how critical it can be, how scary it can be. So can you just tell me how Razorpay has been integrating AI into its suite of products?
First of all, thanks for the invitation. Really glad to be here. And yeah, if you look at AI, right, it's an ever-evolving field, right? It's not a new thing. It's been around for a few decades now. And I think in last few years, like last 2-3 years, the major advancement that has happened, I think, has been on the Gen AI side, right, which has created a lot more excitement in terms of the potential that AI has. So I think of it as like there are the few major roles that AI plays for us. I think one thing that probably is very useful for every single company is how AI really enables everyone and everything that it touches, right? So for any company, and especially for Razorpay, right? I mean, we are in the payment space. We provide payment products, banking products. So for us, there are multiple parts of our stack, right? Whether it's the operational parts like onboarding, fraud management, customer support, or otherwise experience part, like how do we handle different kind of banking downtimes? How do we elevate the experience for consumers in terms of their checkout, right? So, and then the third part inside the company as well, that how do we enable our people, right? So this is how I kind of think of it, like in these three terms, how we are using AI in Razorpay. How do we enable all our operational teams or all our operational elements that are there? Because I think infusing AI in any of those things leads to an uptick. For example, in customer support, just doing any kind of Gen AI-based chatbots, right? Now you can do chatbot. I mean, we had support agents, let's say, in Hindi, English, in Kannada, in a few other languages, but AI can really take it to next level. You can enable customer support in 10 languages at the go, right? And which is very difficult to have that kind of expertise in the team at the outset, right? Or otherwise just giving real-time responses. Then same for onboarding. Like as a fintech, I mean, from a compliance perspective, we have a very elaborate onboarding process in terms of checking KYC, checking website or the merchant's business, or checking the storefront, verifying whether the business is genuine or not, right? Verifying their social media footprint and whatnot, right? So it's a very complex onboarding process, and it takes a while. It's not like signing up for a WhatsApp or Instagram, right? And for the customers today, for the entrepreneurs today, they want as simple of a process as possible. So it's really just not possible to simplify the process without the use of AI. So with AI, we are able to automate it to a very good extent. I would say like close to like 70-75% of automation, it's akin to like opening like a super complex corporate bank account. But because of leveraging AI in terms of at every step, whether it's verifying the business model or suggesting what is the kind of the business the company is doing, all the documents that they need to upload, and then the documents also vary depending on the type of the business, right? I think we are able to shorten that process, simplify that process, handhold the customer. So a lot of these operational elements that are there, we encourage the teams on the ground to use machine learning or use Gen AI to the extent possible. Then I think on the customer experience part, again, that's where what I think is like really the innovation part that is there. Like how do you use AI to design products which otherwise wouldn't have been possible? And that's where I think a lot of the scale that Razorpay has achieved. So we see a lot of transactions today, a lot of data points today. So how do we use those to design new products which otherwise cannot exist, right? And that is where I think certain things that we are doing, like can we provide buyer protection just on the basis of the data that we've already seen with consumers, with businesses. In e-commerce, there's a huge problem around cash on delivery and return to origin. Like 50% of the orders that are shipped in cash on delivery usually see some kind of returns. Either they are returned because the customer didn't want it, or the customer didn't want to pay for it, or they didn't like the order, whatever reason. Right? So can we predict that in advance and help the businesses save on the return cost to the extent because seeing the network, seeing the different data points, whether it's the PIN code or the consumer or the kind of the order or the order value, we can predict what is the probability of the order getting returned, and there's a huge cost that the business incurs, right? So this is on the experience side. Like, how do we enable the experience for different different kind of personalities, different kind of businesses, and how can you build really innovative products on top that we are really well suited to do? And that is where you would see that on the application layer that we call it, right? Like, there are new kind of companies that have come out of India. There are new kind of products that can come out of India, and it can really go, of course, solve the problems in the Indian context, but of course also go global and solve for the world in a big way, right? And I think the third element, which is also very interesting, which I think a lot of organizations can pay attention to, is the people element. I think all our people, whether it's developers, designers, right, product managers, salespeople, I think it really benefits their productivity if they can learn how to use AI tools in their day-to-day work, day-to-day stack. Okay, and I think the nature of the work itself will undergo a change as people become more expert in using AI. And some of it will be generational change, some of it will be seeping in slowly, and then suddenly you'll see like a dramatic change in the tooling of every single function that exists in the company, right? So at this point, we are encouraging a lot of people to use AI tools. But just to give an example, if you take design as a function, right? In design, like we used to recruit people who are really good at using design tools, right? Because you need to understand you need to have really good mastery and expertise over the tools to produce good designs. But now what has happened with AI is that it's easier to produce designs. It's easier to write prompts and get an output and then sort of edit that, right? Provide a base infrastructure, a base design system, and then produce designs on top of that. So the mastery on tools itself has, the requirement for mastery on tools itself kind of goes down, and the requirement on doing more prompts and the requirement on being a good judge of design, or being a good editor, and being having a sense of what the consumers will want, right? That goes up because now it's more easy to produce designs of different quality, different types, but what will work in the marketplace, right? That judgment becomes more important. So then our interview process also needs to change accordingly, and we have to evaluate people more on their sense of design and their judgment criteria and their editing abilities rather than just the pure play creation abilities. So that's just for design, but you can extrapolate it into every other function, whether it is engineering or security or infrastructure, right? And you can see like the impact of AI playing out in the skill set requirement of those functions, and that itself will change.
So Shashank, you spoke about how I think it's touching upon upskilling, right? Where you need people to also know how to use it, like for example, at any CXO level or anything. So would that ever come across as a limitation or a challenge to say fully understand AI and implement it into your system?
I think it's like any other skill set, right? You don't have it at the start, but you need to consciously invest in that direction. People can do it at an individual level, but you can also push it from a cultural perspective, right, at the organization level, and see, okay, like, this is something new, and this is a new tool, right, in my tool belt, and this is gonna give huge productivity. But unless I'm gonna adopt it proactively and I'm gonna push it down, because any kind of change is really uncomfortable for people, right? It's not gonna happen by default. And if you keep doing it like month over month, year over year, then I think over a period of time, it becomes a competency. It becomes a core competency, right? Which then gives you an edge, because not every organization will go through that journey by default. Some of them will learn it over time. See, it's like any other shift. Like when the shift happened from desktop to mobile, for example, right? Or from 2G to 4G. Not all companies took advantage of it. And the internet companies of early 2000 and current look very different because they couldn't manage those technology navigations, that happened, right? So that is why, as an organization psychology, it's very important that you encourage people to adopt that kind of tooling in their day-to-day work. And I can tell you that most of the organization leaders obviously are from times when these technologies were not in place. So it's not very natural for leaders also. And most of the leaders are in meetings, are reviewing strategy or reviewing people's work. They are not the ones using that technology day in, day out. But they still have to have the sense that they have to push their people, their teams to use the latest technologies, right? So it's not easy. It's definitely not an automatic thing. But yeah, like just pushing on it month over month, year on year, I think that competency starts building in, and it really benefits the people who are able to get there.
Great. Considering a country like India, where you have different sectors, you have underserved communities especially. So how would AI in finance or say in fintech, like say Razorpay, kind of address this and mitigate this kind of problem that exists?
I think reaching people who are not part of the financial ecosystem, right? I think is a goal, for the industry, for the government, right, for the regulator, right? So it's a goal which is very well aligned. But it's really difficult because, you are trying to reach people who are coming up the technology curve, right? Most of them are using smartphone for the first time. Usually our goal in most of those scenarios, right, is that whenever is their first point of interaction with financial technology, and in India, in our scenario, in India's case, most of the people, mostly have a bank account, let's say, through the Jan Dhan Yojana. So they will see their friends or their family or someone in their community using UPI to make a transfer, right, and moving away from cash. So they would come on UPI for the first time. I think our endeavor usually is, okay, how do we make that process as simple as possible? How do we ensure that, for example, if they're coming onto UPI, if they're paying a business, right, how can we handhold them at that point of time? How can we provide an experience that is really good? And again, in all of these steps, the AI plays a role because it's a very good enabler, right? So you can figure out whether customer is in which part of the country, what language they are comfortable in, right? What is their banking provider, what kind of mobile phone that they have, and triangulating those data points, you can personalize the experience a lot more than what is possible. I like to think of it that for every person in the room, their experience on Instagram, their experience on Google is heavily personalized. Everyone's Instagram feed looks very different. Everyone's Google search results look very different. But when you go to a financial transaction, when you go to a bank, the experience is very similar for most people in that sense. It's not personalized. But that's the place where it can get to in next few years, where your banking experience, your payments experience, your financial experience is a lot more tailor-made for you, for what we say, like for the audience of one, right? Rather than for the broad cohorts or broad demographics that we divide people in today. That we say, hey, are you tackling India 1 or India 2 or India 3, right? Are you going into like a sort of a region where Hindi is well understood, or you have to like really regional languages and you have to tailor your product for that, right? Instead of like thinking of product development in that model, I think it will evolve to a place where from the get-go you can personalize a lot better, and these are not investments to be made later on, but you should have ready-made solutions available to do this, right? And even in fintech, that applies to a very core extent, because that is what will help people get a lot of confidence, because if they see financial tools that they are very well familiar with in a language, in a model, in a visualization that they understand. And that's the endeavor that we are also sort of pushing towards.
So moving on to another burning topic in finance is the security aspect of it. So we see that's a very exciting segment to just for hackers or whoever, just to get into it and siphon off money or cheat people. So now in today's era, again with AI, Do you think this can be addressed to a large extent? And also specifically in Razorpay, like how are you, going through this particular problem?
I mean, from the start, security has been a cat and mouse game, right? And that's not going to change. Uh, I think with the way I look at it is like with Gen AI coming in and with LLMs coming in, it really opens up a new vector uh, of ways that you can abuse a product, right? Or you can get sort of an agent to do things which otherwise wasn't possible earlier because you had, let's say, maybe a human being on that side or a set of static rules on the side. Now you have sort of a semi-intelligent agent which is trained to do certain things and where like the developers themselves don't fully understand like how because it acts like a black box, right? So the security implications of that is very different. I don't think the industry also fully understands it yet, right? We are still adopting those tools. We are still adopting like, automated agents in sort of every workflow that we have, right? I think security needs to evolve to tackle those scenarios. I think it's a great opportunity, right, to build new solutions, to build new companies. And obviously it's cybersecurity, especially in the financial domain, fintech domain, is always going to be top of mind. I see the challenge that for a lot of traditional incumbents who are not tech first in nature, this is going to further make their life difficult, right? Because in India, we're still dealing with figuring out how to, keep all the cybersecurity issues at bay, right? And it's no longer a case of just upgrading your software, just putting out a firewall, just ensuring that, you have all kind of DLP set up. Now you have to go one level beyond and say, okay, like, everywhere I'm deploying my agent, how do I black box it and how do I say that it is very well protected and it's not going to do things that I don't desire it to do as a system? And that's not an easy problem statement. So yeah, I think it's a good challenge in that sense, and it's a good opportunity as well for a lot of new age entrepreneurs or new age engineers to design solutions for that era, because I think that's going to be a large space and I think most of the organizations will dedicate good amount of budgets also to it.
So isn't it kind of scary that although AI is kind of going to help you, but at the same time it's also accelerating the ways it can be misused, right?
That's always a problem with any technology change. I don't worry about it too much. Because at the end of the day, I would say like it's still at a place where, we are designing those systems, right? And at least at a capability level, it's still not there that, AI can do anything on its own, right? It's still fairly controlled, fairly task-oriented, right? But it's evolving at a very rapid pace. So I think we have to keep a watch and we have to keep seeing how we, evolve our defenses as well at the same time. But if you see, like in the last 50 years, the technology evolution has been really amazing, right? And we have been able to harness it for extremely positive ways. And I don't think that's going to change. So that evolution will continue happening. And at the same time, we'll keep seeing how we, keep it pointed in the right direction and how we really use it for positive use cases. And I would rather worry more about, okay, how do we harness the power of that technology more and more so that, the firms in India, the companies in India, people in India are really competitive at the global stage, because that's historically been the challenge that, technology evolution reaches our shore a bit later, right? Like, smartphones, for example, 4G, for example, right? But now that gap is really closing, right? So, but even to this day, like I think the evolution on the AI's foundation models is still happening in Silicon Valley, and we are sort of adopting it. So I would still worry that we adopt those technologies a lot faster than worry about like, all these kind of fears, because I think they're still very much in the background.
So then just going on to then regulation and compliance being in place to, kind of check a lot of things. So would that impede innovation or the kind of solutions that you come up with, say in India specifically, like with the rules that are in place?
See, I think our regulator is very progressive here. It's partnered very well with the industry to promote UPI, to promote banking, right? Really drives down the cost of financial infrastructure. I think India has the lowest cost of financial infrastructure by a significant margin, right? And they have done this while ensuring that the majority of the industry is like really compliant and understands what is the value of compliance, right? The different demographics that is there in India are very well, fairly different from the developed countries and some of the developing countries as well, right? So a lot of those compliances come in with really good reasons. I think for both the industry, and I've talked about especially Razorpay as well, like we have to really think that even for compliance, how do you leverage AI to make it better, make it, flag it in a much earlier fashion, right? Because what happens even now, right? You have all these compliance audits, you have all these compliance checklists, you have all these compliance rules and regulations that the companies are expected to adhere to. And the way you adhere to most of those compliances is slightly old school in the sense that you have different kind of processes, you have different kind of audit mechanisms to catch those. But I think there's a good amount of space for AI to cause disruption, and we are thinking about, okay, how do we improve? What kind of tooling we can invest in, where a lot of the compliance becomes technology-driven rather than people and process-driven, which has been the case historically, right? How do we invest into our tooling stack that during product development or during product rollout, the spirit of the compliance leads to certain regulations? Is there a way that we can have machines learn those things? Then it can become very interesting in the way you flag any of the compliance issues that are coming out proactively rather than reactively, right? And that reactive flagging happens whether internally or externally via the regulator. That's been the case, right? It's very difficult to flag issues proactively. But I think AI presents an opportunity in the compliance tech space broadly, right? That you can evolve the way compliance happens for most of the companies. I think even the regulator wants more, what you call like the regulatory tech solutions to come in, and they are thinking about it. Okay, is there a way to leverage some of these things to make their life better also? Because there's only so much audit you can do. There's only so much checklist that you can follow. The space of financial technology is evolving at a pace that some of those checklists, become very reactive in nature and come into place like after years, if not after, after months, right? So that's the potential that I see. I think it's still to play out. It will probably play out in the next 5 years. And I think it's a great opportunity again, because I think India is one of the few countries which takes compliance and regulations very seriously. So there's good opportunity for homegrown solutions to come up there.
Got it. Just one last one. So what do you foresee as the next emerging trend in fintech where AI would also be involved, like something that's going to be revolutionary?
I think I touched upon it. The broad thing that I see, from a next 5 years lens is that the personalization in fintech needs to reach a really significantly better level. See, I like to think of it this way, right? Like, you have the large banks in the country, who build the financial infrastructure rails. So they are like the trains in the country. You go from point A to point B, you take a train, and then you reach there, right? But for a last mile connectivity, then you have to go to your home. Someone wants to go in a rickshaw. Someone wants to go in a Mercedes. Someone wants to take a metro, right? I think the fintechs in the country are really solving for that last mile connectivity. And even today, I think we have solved for, let's say, like the first 350 million people that are there, which are broadly present in the UPI ecosystem. But for us to solve for the broader India, which is 1.4 billion people, right? That is still 3-4x of there. So the 10x growth of fintech that is going to happen is that the number of people who are going to use financial services, financial technology itself will grow by 3-4x. And then the number of times they are going to use financial technology, even people in this room today, that is going to grow by 3-4x. So potentially the market for fintech itself will scale up by 10 times in next decade, right? Just by market expansion and just by use case expansion. And I think a big part of it will be driven because of personalization. Like, how do you solve for that, for different kind of use cases? How do you bring those? And so that's the biggest evolution in my mind, right? And the technology shift, of course, AI sort of underpins that. But there might be one or two other technology shifts that will happen RBI itself has come up with the concept of unified lending interface, ULI, which they are thinking of conceptualizing on similar lines as UPI. And we know how disruptive UPI has been for payment space. So, some kind of disruption in terms of, how lending happens for every consumer might be something that as an evolution that we'll see. Similarly, I think on banking side, we know how banking works in today's world. But again, I like to compare banking with the likes of Instagram and Google and Facebook. And I see that there's a significant amount of delta, right? Your banking experience can be really tailor-made and personalized and very mobile first and cloud first. And that, again, will happen in the next 10 years, and it will be led by a lot of fintechs and banks who are able to adopt that mindset. So that 10x growth, and then underpinning that, whether it's AI, whether it's new ways of doing lending, whether it's new ways of doing banking, that will sort of underpin the transformation of the sector.
So AI as a companion, customization, that's what we're headed towards. Thank you so much, Shashank.